Thank you, Madhuji. Our next speaker is the wonderful Professor Bharat Guptaji, whose writings have altered the perception of ancient Greek drama as the origin of Western theatre and established its utter closeness with ancient Indian theatre as part of an Indo-European construct. An international authority on the Natya Shastra and classical Greek theatre, Dr. Gupta is here to deliver a talk on Land of the KAMSUTRA. Dr. Bharat Guptaji.
Namaskar. After all these highly spiritual, elevating talks by young men and women, here I stand before you, a very elderly, if not a very old person, going to talk about the Kama Sutra or SHRINGARA. So, I hope you will welcome the change of rasa, and you will also welcome a deeper and a more subtle aspect of the feminine, about which I shall try to say something to you. So let me start with a Mangalacharan, a modern composition. Ankadhirudena gajananena mugdhena balena virajamana sa sarva santap hari kriparda himadriputri paripatu vishwam. So let Himadriputri, daughter of Himalaya, protect the whole world. You see, this whole tradition of calling women after their father or after their area of birth is a very old one in India. In recent times, women have sometimes attempted to retain their father's name, but actually in India, it has been a custom. So Sita is also called Vaidehi and Gauri is also called Himadriputri. Now, the talk about the land of Kama Sutra is not going to be on Kama Sutra itself. Unfortunately, it is a rather abused text because it has been reduced to something very limited, something very physical, something which almost appears as comic. What actually it is something which we really have to understand. Kama Sutra is also called Kama Shastra. And because it has the appellation Shastra, therefore it adds another aspect to it. Because Shastra, Kimiti Shastram, Shasanopayam. It is a method of approaching a particular result. And therefore, Kama Shastra and Kama Sutra itself says something very significant, which is hardly ever mentioned in the context of Kama Shastra. In the opening chapter, Vatsyayan makes it clear. How are you going to pursue Kama? How are you going to pursue SHRINGARA? How are you going to pursue the erotic? And the answer is that out of the three aims of life, dharma, artha and kama, kama is to be pursued so that the other two are not harmed. And then he goes on to say a general principle that if you have to pursue dharma, then you must also not harm kama and artha. You see, and many examples are there in stories, in myths, and in different itihasas, etc., to substantiate this. So, Kama Shastra means that this Kama has to be pursued within the boundaries of Dharma and Artha. It is not the image of India, the most liberal or the sexually liberated once upon a time land, which permitted unbridled indulgence. Having said this, let me come to the finer aspect of Kama. That finer aspect you don't find in the KAMSUTRA itself, because KAMSUTRA is about the social structure of erotic life of India, the festivals, largely the life of the courtesans. You know, till 10th century in India, the life of the courtesans, or what is now called prostitution, was absolutely not only legal, but it was something highly desirable. In fact, it was desirable all over the world. It's a Christian problem which started, and it's the Christians who started making it illegal and looked upon it as immoral. That's very well known. I don't have to elaborate. So, the Kama Shastra is more about sexual indulgence, but that whole indulgence is based upon what may be called in this context as Shringara. If you look upon Kama as a Shringara, then you find the real answer to it. And the book which talks about different aspects of Shringara and different depictions of Shringara in theatre, in poetry, in epics, in performance, in music, and in arts is not Vatsyayan, but the Natya Shastra. And what does that text have to say? There is a longer verse which I don't want to recite because I have very little time. Translated, it runs like this: all thought and feeling is rooted in desire that manifests itself in unaccounted ways. There is desire for just action, for wealth, for liberation, and for union between man and woman. That is the most harmonious of all unions and leads to sexual joy achieved through many activities which are called Shringara. Created with diverse dispositions, women alone can bring this joy and comfort that everybody longs for in this world. So joy is synonymous with women. Now this is not to be looked upon in a hedonistic way, that women are meant just for pleasure. And the Sanskrit text runs like this: Sukhasya cha striyo moolam nana shila acharascha taha. Now the idea that is woman a Devi? Is woman Shakti? Is woman this only? Is not the true idea. The classical approach has been something like this. See, there is a verse, and the verse goes like this. Karyeshu mantri, karaneshu dasi, bhojyeshu mata, shayaneshu rambha, kshamaya dharitri, dharmanukula, shadgunanavita bharya dhanya labhante. So there are 6 roles defined here for the woman. Karyeshu Mantri, she is the one who advises you in whatever task you undertake. Once the task is decided upon, then she executes it. Karaneshu Dasi. Bhogyeshu Mata, she has to feed you. And the best feeding is done only by the mother. Shayaneshu Rambha, that is Shringara. Dharmanukula, not Patyanukula or Purushanukula, but Dharmanukula. She has to follow the dharma, not follow the husband. And Kshamaya Dharitri, she can forgive. Now, these are some of the specific qualities that are mentioned. And here I will only say that the Western paradigm of equality, which just says that if there are jobs for, let's say, 20 butchers in society, then 10 of them can be given to women, is not the real answer, because that cuts down upon the very special nature, quality, and ability of woman as it has been looked in the Indian texts. I'll go back to history quickly, because any concept of sexuality has to be rooted in a philosophical perception of the world. It cannot be just seen in isolation. And that is why I think that analysts like Freud or even Jung, they fail because they look upon a particular aspect only. In terms of philosophy, we are told that in the Vedic times, society was patriarchal. This is the usual mainstream Western idea that the Aryans came down, they were patriarchal people, they had subjugated women. It was a male-dominated society. This whole discourse totally overlooks the most essential way of life that the Vedic Aryans or the Vedic people had, which was yajna. Now, it is to be noted that no yajna can be performed without a wife, without your feminine part with you. And what does that mean? Does it mean that she is just there as an object or somebody who obeys a certain ritual? It certainly does not, because she is essential. And we all know the story that even Rama had to make an image of Sita when he did the Ashwamedha. So the idea that a yajna, which is a replay of creation, which is a replay of what happens between gods and men, and how creation rejuvenates itself, essentially needs the feminine principle. And therefore, the presence of the woman as part of the Yajman, being the Yajman itself, is to be noted. And that is something which is an entire counter to this whole discourse of patriarchy which has been developed in the West. The idea that society was once matriarchal and then through the invasion of the Indo-Europeans, it became patriarchal in India, in Greece, and various other things. So if you look at the texts itself, if you look at the ways of life, it is something very different. Then, what do you find? Who are the two major goddesses in the in the Vedic pantheon? Shri and Saraswati, Vak and Shri and Vak or Saraswati. So one is Shri. Shri is prosperity, and prosperity is feminine. It is seen only in those terms. Lakshmi is seen only in feminine terms, and the major prayer in the Shri Sukta is Alakshmi Nirunuda Me Grihat. That Alakshmi should be out and Lakshmi should be in. And similarly, the capacity to think, to create, is again in feminine terms. Pavaka Anahas Saraswati, Vaje Bhirvajinivati. It is in terms, intelligence is entirely in terms of the feminine principle. This shows 22. What does this mean, Dimple? 22 seconds more? Oh dear. I thought I had just begun. Anyway, maybe I'll take 2 minutes more. Huh? Yes. Now, when you go down history, you find that the new culture that develops is essentially a culture of God with goddess, God with concert. And it is at this point that there is a new development that takes place. I'll have to skip instead of talking about the development, that there is also the Shakta cult that develops, which finally imagines the feminine as supreme power. Shivaha Shaktya Yukto Yadi Bhavati Shaktaha Prabhavitum, as Shankaracharya, the great Vedanti, says in Ananda Lahari. And it is at this point that tantras come in, and even those cultures like the Bauddha cultures, which were believing not so much in avatar, not so much in the depiction of the flesh or depiction of the goddess, also became in Tantra entirely devoted through Vajrayana and later into the worship of the Shringara. And around this time, Shringara through Tantra takes into another elevation, the elevation through Ananda. I don't have the time to elaborate through the whole history of development of Shringara in its finest aspect when you come to the point of bhakti, and the new concept of bhakti develops where the Purush and Prakriti, Radha and Krishna, are entirely one, and in most of the cults, Radha overtakes. So, we have talked a lot about it. Makarand this morning talked about how the honor, the worldly prosperity, the values, they all center around the creative principle, the Shri and the Saraswati. And if you look at what is called the Western discourse, which is largely the reformist discourse which has taken over in India, is something which I would say is entirely counter to the tradition, and it doesn't solve the problems. For instance, when we are thinking about the homoerotic relations today, the biggest problem today is created by the Western discourse. The Indian discourse about homoeroticism was very clear. Again, the Kama Shastra says, Dvividha, two kinds, is Tritiya Prakritihi. So, the homoerotics are considered to be absolutely natural as the third Prakriti. And the modern Indian, including sometimes a Swami like Ramdev, is unable to understand that this is God-given. You can't cure them. It is stupid to think of curing because they are natural. They are what they are, come in the creation. And therefore, it is not on the basis of a Western reform that we have to get rid of Article 377. I hope the BJP government rises to the occasion and removes it. But entirely on the basis of the Indian tradition of KAMSUTRA and of Artha Shastra, where the homoerotics are fully protected. And the last thing that I will say in half a minute with regard to homoeroticism, that perhaps we don't have to look at the solutions of rehabilitating the homoerotics the way the West is doing, again by absolute equality, which is just stop noticing them. By giving them absolutely the same rights as everyone, what you do is you really forget them. I don't have the time to elaborate as to what I really mean and what complications that would create, but I think that if we look at how we have dealt with this problem, how we gave a very creative and a safe place to those people in the past, we can devise something for the present milieu, something for the present time, and that can be an abiding solution for the Indian system. Thank you very much.